The 10 fatal problems with statism and the evidence behind each one. If statism worked, it would not be controversial anymore. It would have solved poverty, it would have stabilized economies, and it would have outperformed freedom somewhere, consistently. Instead, every attempt produces the same failures, just with different slogans and different excuses. This is not about intentions, it is not about intelligence, but it is about structure. Here are the 10 core problems with statism and a real historical example for every single one. Number 1. The knowledge problem. No central authority can access or process the knowledge held by millions of individuals. This knowledge is local, tacit, and constantly changing. People know their own needs, skills, constraints, and opportunities in ways that cannot be summarized in reports. A classic real-world example is the Soviet Union. The USSR employed millions of planners, used massive data collection systems, and devoted entire ministries to production forecasting. Yet it still failed to match basic consumer demand. Chronic shortages of food, housing, and consumer goods persisted for decades. The planners did not fail because they lacked effort. They failed because the information they needed never existed in a form that could be centralized. Number 2, incentives are misaligned. In statist systems, decision makers do not bear the full cost of failure. They spend other people's money, face limited downside, and are rewarded for appearances rather than outcomes. A clear example is government infrastructure spending today. Numerous audits of public projects show systemic cost overruns. Large public works frequently exceed initial budgets by 20%, 50%, or more. In contrast, private firms that miss budgets face bankruptcy or takeover. When failure is not punished, it repeats. Statism rewards political survival, not accuracy. Number 3. Prices stop functioning as signals. Prices are not just numbers, they are information. They communicate scarcity, urgency, and consumer preferences without any central direction. When the state interferes with prices, that information disappears. A simple example is rent control. Cities that impose rent caps consistently experience housing shortages, reduced maintenance, and lower housing quality. Economists across the ideological lines agree on this point, including studies of New York, San Francisco, and Stockholm. The problem is not greed, it is the destruction of the price signal. Without prices, planners guess, and guessing at scale always fails. Number 4. Coercion replaces consent. Statism does not rely on voluntary participation, it relies on compulsory funding and enforced compliance. A clear example is government monopolies in education. Families are taxed regardless of whether public schools meet their needs. Poor performance does not result in lost revenue. Teachers and administrators remain funded regardless of outcomes. In voluntary systems, providers must earn participation. In statist systems, participation is mandatory. When exit is impossible, accountability collapses. Number 5. Power inevitably concentrates. Centralization creates single points of control. Those points attract corruption, lobbying, and capture. A historical example is regulatory agencies in the United States. Industries routinely influence the very agencies meant to regulate them. This phenomenon, known as regulatory capture, is documented across banking, healthcare, energy, and transportation. The problem is not bad regulators. It is concentrated authority. When power is centralized, those with resources will capture it. Number 6, moral hazard spreads. When losses are protected, risk-taking increases. A powerful example is financial bailouts. In 2008, major financial institutions were rescued after taking excessive risks. The lesson was clear. Profits are private, losses are socialized. Subsequent studies show that firms expecting bailouts take greater risks afterward, not fewer. Statism teaches institutions that consequences are optional. Number 7, rent-seeking replaces productivity. Statism turns political access into a source of profit. Instead of competing to serve consumers, firms compete to influence regulators. A well-documented example is licensing requirements. Occupational licensing now affects roughly 25% of the workers in the United States, up from about 5% decades ago. Many of these licenses have no safety justification and exist primarily to restrict competition. This raises prices, reduces opportunity, and protects insiders. Political access becomes more valuable than innovation. Number 8, innovation is suppressed. Innovation requires experimentation, variation, and failure. Central rules standardize behavior and prevent adaptation. A historical example is telecommunications. When telecom industries were heavily regulated monopolies, innovation stagnated. After deregulation and competition increased, prices fell, access expanded, and technology advanced rapidly. Central planning freezes systems in time. Decentralization allows learning. Number 9, responsibility and resilience erode. When decisions are centralized, individuals disengage. Skills weaken, initiatives decline, and communities lose autonomy. A clear example is disaster response. In centralized systems, local actors wait for permission, funding, and direction. Delays are common. In decentralized systems, individuals and communities adapt immediately using local knowledge. Studies of disaster recovery consistently show that spontaneous, private coordination outperforms centralized response in speed and effectiveness. Statism crowds out self-reliance. Number 10. The historical record never changes, and this is the most important point. There is no counterexample where heavy statism produced sustained prosperity. Every system that expanded state control experienced slower growth and stagnation, and every system that turned to freedom experienced improvement. China's post-1978 market reforms lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty after decades of central planning failure. India's 1991 liberalization ended stagnation after the license Raj, and Eastern Europe grew rapidly after abandoning central planning. The pattern is global and consistent. Notice something important about all these examples. They are separated by centuries, cultures, technologies, and ideologies. The Soviet Union failed with slide rules and 5-year plans. Maoist China failed with mass mobilization and ideological enforcement. And modern welfare states fail with advanced data systems and economic modeling. Different tools, same outcome. Because the failure is not technical, it is structural. You cannot centralize knowledge. You cannot override incentives. You cannot replace voluntary coordination with authority. Every status system eventually collides with reality, and reality always wins. Statism does not fail because the wrong people are in charge. It fails because no one can be. No institution can replace dispersed knowledge. No authority can fix broken incentives. And no coercive system can scale human cooperation. Freedom is not chaos. Freedom is coordination without force. And that is why statism always fails.